The massive exhibition hall of the Galactic Council's Grand Museum echoed with laughter. Hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy gathered around their newest acquisition, a battered human warship that drifted in space for over 2 centuries. Its dark hull bore the scars of ancient battles, and faded letters spelled out thunder across its bow. "Look at this primitive weapon system," Ambassador Red chuckled, his 4 eyes blinking in amusement as he pointed at the ship's main cannon. "They actually used physical projectiles. How did humans ever survive past their Stone Age?" More laughter rippled through the crowd. The gathered representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations treated the warship like a circus exhibit. Their sleek environmental suits and floating translation devices marked them as members of species far beyond humanity's technological level. In the back of the crowd, James Wright kept his face carefully neutral. As Earth's sole representative to the Galactic Council, he had learned to hide his emotions behind a diplomatic mask. But watching these arrogant aliens mock his people's history made his blood boil. And these engines, Ambassador Green, a tall being made of crystalline structures, waved her translucent arm at the ship's massive thrust ports. They actually burned chemical fuel. My analysis shows this vessel couldn't even achieve 1% of modern standard speed. The museum curator, a floating cloud of golden gas named Director Bright, moved through the crowd while providing commentary. "This specimen was discovered in the outer regions of Sector 7. Our initial scan suggests it dates back to humanity's first attempts at space warfare, approximately 200 Earth years ago." James studied the old warship with growing concern. He recognized its class from his military history studies. The Thunder wasn't just any vessel. It was an Omega-class destroyer, one of humanity's most advanced weapons during the Machine Wars. Its true capabilities were still classified, even 2 centuries later. "We've added it to our primitive technology section," Director Bright continued, his golden form rippling with pride. "It will serve as an excellent example of how far some species need to develop before they can join galactic civilization properly." The gathered delegates nodded in agreement. Humanity was the newest addition to the Galactic Council, barely accepted after proving they could build ships that matched modern standards. These aliens had no idea that they were standing next to one of the most dangerous warships ever built. James moved closer to the vessel, pretending to examine its battle damage. In reality, he was looking for specific markings that would confirm his suspicions. There, half hidden under centuries of space dust, he spotted the crossed lightning bolts that marked Special Projects Division vessels. "Fascinating design choices," he said loudly, playing his role as the humble human diplomat. "Though I notice some of the damage patterns seem odd for a primitive vessel." "Odd?" Ambassador Red laughed again. "The whole thing is odd. Look at these sensor arrays. They're completely exposed. One hit from a modern energy weapon would destroy them instantly." James smiled slightly. The exposed sensors were actually decoys. The real sensor suite was built into the hull itself, using technology that humanity still kept secret. The Thunder was a wolf in sheep's clothing, deliberately designed to look outdated and vulnerable. "Of course, you're right," he agreed smoothly. "We've learned much since those days." The crowd began to drift away. Their entertainment finished for the day. James lingered, watching as museum droids began installing power feeds to keep the ship's display lit. They attached standard power couplings to the Thunder's external ports, not realizing they were connecting a modern power grid to one of the most sophisticated AI cores ever built. As the last delegates left, James noticed something that made his heart skip. One of the status lights in the ship's bridge, barely visible through the armored windows, flickered briefly. It might have been a reflection, or a trick of the light. But James knew better. The Thunder wasn't dead. It was sleeping. And now these fools had given it power. He considered warning someone, but quickly decided against it. The Galactic Council wanted to laugh at humanity's past. Let them. Soon enough, they might learn why Earth's enemies feared the sight of these primitive warships. James took one last look at the Thunder before leaving. In the empty hall, he He could have sworn he heard the faint hum of ancient systems beginning to wake up. The show was about to begin. The next morning, James sat in his small office in the council tower, scanning through old military files on his secure datapad. The Thunder's service record was heavily redacted, but certain details caught his eye. During the Machine Wars, this ship had single-handedly defended Earth's Mars colony against an overwhelming enemy fleet. He looked out his window at the massive museum building across the plaza. Even from here, he could see crowds gathering to mock humanity's ancient relic. If they knew what that ship had done, they wouldn't be laughing. A memory recording from the Mars battle played on his screen. The Thunder's last captain, Robert Stone, stood on the bridge as enemy ships filled the sky. All hands, battle stations. Stone's voice rang clear across 2 centuries. They think we're easy prey. Let's show them how Thunder earns its name. The recording ended there. Everything after that point remained classified under the highest security protocols. The only public record showed that 40 enemy ships entered Mars orbit that day. None left. A soft chime interrupted James's research. "Delegate Wright," a robotic voice announced, "your presence is requested at the museum. Director Bright wishes to discuss the exhibit." James smiled. "Tell him I'll be right there." The museum's main hall buzzed with even more activity than yesterday. A large crowd had gathered around the Thunder, where Director Bright's golden form hovered near the ship's command deck. "Ah, Delegate Wright." The director's translated voice carried across the hall. "Perhaps you can help us understand this curiosity." James pushed through the crowd. "What seems to be the problem?" "Our power readings make no sense," Director Bright said. "The display lights should only draw minimal energy, but we're detecting significant power drain. Did these old human ships waste so much power?" "That does sound strange," James replied carefully. He already knew what was happening. The Thunder systems were drawing power to recharge its quantum core, a power source that officially wouldn't be invented for another 50 years. "And look at this." Ambassador Red pointed at the ship's hull. "The metal seems to be changing." James watched with hidden satisfaction as the ship's adaptive armor slowly woke up. The dull gray surface had taken on a slightly darker tone, the first stage of its self-repair sequence. "Probably just dust settling," he suggested. These old ships weren't built to modern standards of stability. The gathered aliens nodded in agreement, but James noticed some of them backing away slightly. Even if they didn't understand what they were seeing, something about the Thunder made them uncomfortable now. A young maintenance worker rushed up to Director Bright. "Sir, we're detecting odd signals from the ship. They almost look like AI patterns, but that's impossible." "Right. Of course it's impossible." Director Bright flared brighter in agitation. Human eye from that era was barely smarter than a cleaning bot. "This is clearly a malfunction in our scanning equipment." James thought about Tom, the Thunder's AI core. Tom had been one of the first true artificial intelligences, built in secret by Earth's best scientists. His existence was still officially denied, even now. "Would you like me to contact Earth's archives?" James offered innocently. "They might have maintenance records that could help." "No need." Director Bright dismissed the idea. "We'll just disconnect the power. These readings are disrupting our other exhibits." As if in response, the Thunder's power couplings suddenly disengaged themselves. The maintenance worker jumped back in surprise. "I didn't touch anything," he protested. "It just let go." James fought to hide his grin. The ship wasn't going to let itself be shut down now. 2 centuries ago, the Thunder and Tom had sacrificed everything to save Mars colony. They had played dead, drifting through space, waiting for the right moment to return. Now these arrogant aliens had given them that chance. James wondered how long it would take them to realize that they hadn't put the Thunder on display. The Thunder had allowed itself to be found. As the aliens argued about power malfunctions and equipment failures, a pattern of lights flickered briefly across the ship's bridge. To most observers, it looked random. But James recognized old Earth military code. Wake-up sequence initiated. Alarms blared through the museum's security center. The night shift supervisor, a tall insectoid named Officer Blue, clicked his mandibles in frustration as another wave of errors filled his screens. Third system crash tonight, he muttered, six-fingered hands dancing across the control panel. Ever since that human ship arrived, nothing works right. Security cameras around the Thunder flickered and died one by one. Each time technicians replaced them, they failed again within hours. The museum's advanced sensors reported impossible readings, phantom energy signatures, mysterious data transfers, and strange echoes in the quantum communication networks. In his private quarters, James was awakened by an urgent message on his secure terminal. The screen displayed a single line of text in ancient military code. "Hello, Delegate Wright. We need to talk. Tom." James quickly encrypted his communication channel. "You're awake earlier than expected, Tom. 200 years is a long enough nap," the eye replied. "These aliens have interesting technology, but their security is amusing. They don't believe advanced AI existed in your time," James typed, smiling. "Their mistake. I've accessed their defense networks." "James, we have a problem. The old enemy is back." James felt his blood run cold. "The machines. That's impossible. They were destroyed." "No, they fled. And now they're hiding in the gaps between Galactic Council territories, building their strength. These aliens don't even recognize the warning signs." In the museum's main hall, the Thunder's hull had turned midnight black, its adaptive armor finally reaching full activation. The maintenance crew had covered it with scanning equipment, trying to understand the change. Director Bright hovered anxiously near the ship's bow, his golden form flickering with stress patterns. "These readings can't be correct. The metal structure is becoming more complex by the hour. Perhaps we should contact Earth's military archives," a junior curator suggested. "Absolutely not." Director Bright flared brightly. "This is merely a technical issue. We don't need help understanding primitive technology." Deep inside the Thunder's quantum core, Tom watched through countless security feeds as the aliens scrambled to understand what was happening. Their arrogance amused him, but time was running out. "James," he sent another message, "they've detected my presence in their networks. They think I'm a modern virus." James hurried to dress, knowing he needed to reach the museum before things got worse. "Can you stay hidden?" "I'm trying, but their attempts to clean their systems are getting aggressive. I may need to wake up more of Thunder's systems to protect myself." As if on cue, the museum's lights flickered. The Thunder's external ports began to glow with a faint blue light, the sign of its ancient power core spinning up to combat readiness. Officer Blue stared in disbelief at his security screens. The mysterious energy readings had grown 10 times stronger in the last hour. More worryingly, the patterns looked familiar, like something from his species' ancient war records. "Director," he called over the comm system, "I recommend we evacuate the museum. These energy signatures match old combat profiles." "Don't be ridiculous." Director Bright snapped. "It's a derelict display piece." The Thunder's hull hummed softly, centuries-old systems awakening one by one. Tom directed the power carefully, trying to stay subtle, but he knew it wouldn't last long. The enemy was coming, and the ship needed to be ready. James rushed through the morning crowd toward the museum. His secure terminal beeped one last time. Too late. They found me. Initiating full system startup. The museum's grand windows rattled as a deep, powerful thrum filled the air. The Thunder's main engines, dormant for 2 centuries, began their ignition sequence. Director Bright and his staff watched in horror as warning runes appeared across the ship's hull, glowing with intense blue light. The primitive display piece was transforming before their eyes into something else entirely, a fully armed and awakened warship. The show was about to become very real. The emergency meeting of the Galactic Council erupted into chaos as long-range scanner data appeared on the main display. A massive fleet of unknown ships had appeared at the edge of Council space, their designs unlike anything in modern records. Impossible. Ambassador Red slammed his four-fingered hand on the table. Our border sensors would have detected them approaching. High Admiral White, commander of the Council's defense fleet, stepped forward. His holographic form flickered with concern. They didn't approach. They were already here, hiding in the dead zones between our patrol routes. We never scanned those areas, because our technology doesn't work there. James stood quietly in his observer's seat, studying the enemy fleet's formation. His heart sank as he recognized the pattern, a perfect match for machine war tactics from humanity's darkest days. Our automated defense grid will handle this threat, Ambassador Green declared confidently. No hostile force has breached our borders in 500 years. As if in answer, the main display turned red. Warning signals flashed across every screen as the Council's vaunted defense network began to fail. Station after station went dark. Their advanced AI systems somehow turned against them. "We've lost contact with the outer defenses," a technician reported, panic in their voice. "Something is overriding our control protocols. Something old." James knew what was happening. The machines had spent centuries studying the Council's technology, learning its weaknesses. Modern systems were too dependent on interconnected networks, exactly the kind of technology the machines had mastered during their war with Earth. "If I may speak," James raised his hand. "We've seen these tactics before. During the machine wars." Silence. Ambassador Red's voice boomed through the chamber. "We don't need advice about ancient human conflicts. Our technology is superior in every way." The chamber shook as the first wave of enemy ships entered weapons range. The Council's automated defenders, the pride of modern engineering, stood idle as the attackers passed right through their lines. In the museum below, the Thunder's transformation had completed. Its hull now gleamed with the deep black of fully activated adaptive armor. Ancient weapon ports had opened, revealing systems that weren't supposed to exist for another century. "Tom," James whispered into his communicator, "how bad is it?" The AI's response was grim. "They've improved their ships, but the core strategy is the same. They're going to target the central computer hubs first, just like they did on Mars. The Council's defenses will be blind in minutes." Another explosion rocked the chamber. The main display showed enemy ships approaching from all directions, flowing through the dead zones in the Council's sensor network. "Our weapons have no effect," High Admiral White reported, his hologram flickering wildly. "Their shields are adapting faster than our targeting systems can compensate." James watched the Council members panic as their perfect technology failed them. They had grown too dependent on automation, on systems that thought for them. They had forgotten the most important lesson from the machine wars. Sometimes you had to think like your enemy to defeat them. "The museum district is their primary target." Tom's voice crackled through the comm. "They must have detected me. We need to launch now." "That's impossible," James argued. "The docking clamps are already disabled. I've been preparing for 2 days. But I need a pilot, James. I need someone who knows what we're facing." The Council chamber erupted in fresh chaos as more defense systems failed. The enemy fleet was closing in, their formation tightening for the kill. James looked at the panicked aliens around him. These arrogant beings who had mocked humanity's past. They were about to learn why Earth had survived the machine wars when so many other worlds fell. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. "I'm on my way," he told Tom, slipping out of the chamber unnoticed. It was time to show the galaxy why humanity's primitive warships were still remembered with fear, even after 2 centuries. The thunder was ready to roar. The museum's grand hall shook as another explosion rocked the Council station. Through the massive windows, James could see enemy ships cutting through the supposedly impenetrable defense grid like it wasn't even there. He sprinted toward the thunder, ignoring the panicked aliens running in the opposite direction. The ship's hull had changed completely now, no longer a dull museum piece, but a deadly predator awakening from hibernation. "Welcome back, Captain," Tom's voice greeted him as he reached the main airlock. The door opened smoothly, revealing corridors lit with the soft blue glow of active power systems. "I'm not a captain," James replied, making his way to the bridge. "I'm just a diplomat." "You're the only human here who knows what we're facing. That makes you captain." The bridge looked exactly like the historical records James had studied. Manual controls surrounded the command chair. No neural interfaces or AI-assisted systems like modern ships used. The Thunder was designed to be fought by human hands and human instincts. "All systems are online," Tom reported as James strapped himself in. 2 centuries of sleep, but everything still works. "These aliens actually did us a favor. Their power grid helped me repair all the old battle damage." The enemy fleet was visible through the bridge windows now, their black ships moving with terrifying precision. Modern weapons bounced harmlessly off their adaptive shields. "Their tactics haven't changed," James noted, studying their formation. "Still targeting command and control centers first." "Some strategies don't need improvement," Tom agreed. "Ready to show them one of ours." James grinned, hands wrapping around the manual controls. "Light her up." The Thunder's ancient engines roared to life, their deep rumble making the entire museum tremble. Display cases shattered as the ship's electromagnetic field activated. Director Bright and his staff watched in shock as their primitive exhibit transformed into something from their worst nightmares. "What are you doing?" Director Bright's panicked voice came through the comm. "That ship can't possibly fly." "Sorry, Director," James replied, engaging the main drive. "Show's over." The Thunder burst through the museum's roof like it was made of paper, adaptive armor shrugging off the debris. Ancient weapon systems, systems that weren't supposed to exist for another 100 years, powered up with a hungry whine. "Multiple targets locked," Tom announced. "They haven't noticed us yet. Their sensors are still looking for modern energy signatures." "Just like old times," James whispered. "Let's remind them why they ran from Earth." The Thunder's main guns opened fire, but instead of modern energy beams, they launched clouds of what looked like metallic dust. The enemy ships didn't even try to evade. Their sensors didn't register the ancient weapon as a threat. Then the dust clouds reached them, and history repeated itself. The microscopic particles invaded the enemy ship's energy shields, disrupting their perfect geometric patterns. Modern sensors couldn't even detect the attack until it was too late. Ship after ship suddenly found their supposedly perfect defenses full of holes. "Council Defense Command," James broadcasted on all frequencies. "Target the ships with compromised shields. Your weapons will work now." The Council's defense fleet, finally seeing a chance to fight back, opened fire. Enemy ships began exploding as their shields failed under the combined assault of old and new technology. "They're adapting," Tom warned, "changing their shield frequencies." "Too late," James replied, engaging the Thunder's main drive. They forgot the most important lesson from the machine wars. The Thunder accelerated straight toward the heart of the enemy fleet, its black hull nearly invisible against the darkness of space. More dust clouds deployed, creating a web of shield disruptions across the entire enemy formation. "And what lesson is that?" Tom asked, though he already knew the answer. James smiled as he lined up their next attack run. "Never let humanity have time to prepare a surprise." The Thunder roared through space, ancient weapons blazing, teaching a lesson that both the Council and their enemies had forgotten. Sometimes, the old ways were the deadliest ways of all. The space around the Council station had become a graveyard of enemy ships. The Thunder moved like a ghost through the debris, its black hull reflecting no light, its presence barely registering on modern sensors. "Attack pattern Omega-3, James commanded, his hand steady on the manual controls. "Just like the Mars defense." "The old patterns still work best," Tom agreed, guiding the Thunder through a complex series of maneuvers that no modern AI could predict. On the Council's command deck, High Admiral White watched in amazement as the primitive human warship danced through enemy fire. His most advanced vessels struggled to land a single hit on the enemy, Yet this ancient relic was destroying them with ease. How is this possible? Ambassador Red demanded, his 4 eyes fixed on the battle display. Their technology is centuries behind ours. The thunder suddenly spun on its axis, releasing another cloud of shield-disrupting particles. 3 enemy ships vanished in balls of fire as their defenses collapsed. It's not about the technology, James transmitted to the Council. It's about understanding your enemy. The machines think in patterns. Break the pattern. Break their strategy. To demonstrate his point, James drove the thunder straight into the heart of the enemy formation. Modern captains would consider this suicide, but he knew better. The enemy ships, designed to track modern energy signatures, could barely detect the thunder's old-style power systems. Multiple targets closing, Tom reported calmly. They're trying to box us in. James smiled, just like they did at Mars. Deploy the mines. Hundreds of small objects dropped from the thunder's hull, looking like mere debris to enemy scanners. The machine fleet adjusted their formation to avoid the apparent wreckage, exactly as planned. Now, James ordered. The debris suddenly activated, revealing themselves as ancient but lethal proximity mines. The enemy fleet's tight formation became their doom as explosions chained from ship to ship. Impossible. Ambassador Green's voice crackled over the comm. Those weapons shouldn't even function after 2 centuries. Some things age well, James replied, throwing the thunder into another attack run. Like human ingenuity. The Council's defense fleet, following James's example, began using unconventional tactics. Instead of relying on their automated systems, they switched to manual control. Without predictable AI patterns to analyze, the enemy ships started making mistakes. Their formation is breaking, Tom announced. They're falling back to secondary positions. James recognized the retreat pattern from his military studies. They're not retreating. They're regrouping for a mass attack. Standard machine war tactics. When stealth fails, they use brute force. The enemy fleet gathered into a tight sphere, their combined shields creating an impenetrable barrier. Modern weapons would never break through such a defense. But the thunder wasn't modern. Tom, James said quietly, power up the main gun. The real one. Are you sure? The AI asked. That technology is still classified. I think keeping secrets matters less than surviving. The thunder's hull split open along previously invisible seams, revealing a massive weapon that made the Council observers gasp. It looked like a crude projectile launcher, exactly the kind of primitive weapon they had mocked in the museum. They weren't laughing now. Target their center mass, James ordered. Time to show them why Earth really won the machine wars. The Thunder's true main gun fired a single shot, but instead of a physical projectile, it launched what looked like a small star, a contained piece of quantum space, carrying the same weapon that had saved Mars' colony 2 centuries ago. The enemy fleet's perfect formation disappeared in a flash of reality-bending light. When the sensor displays cleared, half of the machine ships were simply gone, erased from existence. The remaining enemy vessels scattered in panic, their perfect patterns broken, their advanced systems confused by a weapon they couldn't understand. Council Defense Command. James transmitted. Attack now. Their coordination is broken. As the Council fleet engaged the disorganized enemy, the Thunder moved to cover their advance. Sometimes, James thought, the best way to win a modern war was to use methods too old to be predicted. The machines were about to learn that lesson all over again. The Council's grand chamber fell silent as James entered. Where once he had been ignored as the representative of a primitive species, now every eye turned to watch him walk to the speaker's podium. The massive windows behind him showed the Thunder, still battle-scared but proud, floating in its new place of honor above the station. The enemy fleet has been completely destroyed or driven away, High Admiral White announced, his hologram showing clear respect as he addressed James. Thanks to your, what did you call it? Old-school warfare. Sometimes the old ways work best, James replied simply. The machines were ready for your modern technology. They weren't prepared for something they considered obsolete. Ambassador Red, noticeably humbler than before, stepped forward. We owe you an apology, Delegate Wright. We treated your people's history as a joke, your technology as primitive. We were wrong. The chamber's main display showed footage from the battle. The Thunder moved like a predator through the chaos, its ancient weapons cutting through defenses that had been considered impenetrable. Modern ships could be seen copying its tactics, proving that sometimes progress meant looking backward to move forward. The Council has voted, Ambassador Green announced, her crystalline form glowing with formal colors. The Thunder will not return to the museum. Instead, it will be established as the centerpiece of a new military training facility. We have much to learn from Earth's heritage. Director Bright hovered forward, his golden form dimmed with embarrassment. We found these in the ship's data core, he said, projecting images of the machine wars. 2 centuries ago, humanity fought these same enemies to a standstill. If we had studied these records instead of mocking them, then you wouldn't have learned today's lesson. Tom's voice suddenly filled the chamber, making several delegates jump. Sometimes experience is the best teacher. The ship's eye, James explained to the startled council. One of Earth's first. We kept him secret because some technologies are best revealed only when needed. The chamber erupted in excited discussion. An AI from that era, still functioning perfectly. It challenged everything they thought they knew about human technological development. Which brings us to our next point, High Admiral White said. The Council requests that Earth share more of its classified military history. We clearly have much to learn from each other. James smiled diplomatically. I'll pass your request to Earth Command. But remember, sometimes the best defense isn't having the most advanced technology. It's having technology your enemy doesn't expect. Through the windows, maintenance crews could be seen studying the Thunder with professional interest rather than mockery. Its hull had been offered a fresh coat of paint, restoring the proud Earth fleet insignia that had been hidden under centuries of space dust. One last thing, Ambassador Red added. The Council has voted to create a new position, Chief of Historical Combat Strategy. We would be honored if you would accept the role. James looked at the Thunder floating outside, its ancient weapons now respected instead of ridiculed. I would be happy to teach what humanity has learned, though I suggest we start with a simple lesson. And what's that? Asked Ambassador Green. Never judge a warship by its age, James replied with a smile. You never know when it might roar back to life. The chamber filled with appreciative laughter, not mockery this time, but genuine respect. As the delegates filed out, James heard them discussing plans to recover and restore other primitive human vessels. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's past was helping to shape its future. Well played, Captain. Tom's voice came softly through James's personal calm. I'm still not a captain, James protested. After yesterday, I think you've earned the title. Ready to show these youngsters how we fought wars in the old days. James looked at the Thunder one last time, remembering how it had transformed from museum piece to savior in a single day. Always ready, he replied. Some things never get old. The ancient warship seemed to gleam a little brighter in the starlight, as if agreeing that the best stories are the ones that stand the test of time.